We're in the book of Esther, and we're in chapter 4, and tonight we're going to start with verse 13, but backing up just a little bit, we see that Mordecai has overheard a plot against the king, obviously to kill him, to do him bodily harm. And if you're going to do the king bodily harm, you better get rid of him completely, or else revenge is right around the corner, right? So they're going to attempt to kill him. Mordecai finds out about it. He lets Esther know. Esther tells the king. The king investigates it, and now Mordecai is all bent out of shape because of the decree that's been issued by Haman. I believe that's where we are. So verse 13 and 14, then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place, but thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed, and who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? And I jumped ahead of myself, didn't I, in the little bit of introduction. So what we find here is an admonishment is given in these verses to Esther by Mordecai. You can almost hear a scolding in his voice. Because she had begun to make some excuses about, if I go before the king, I'll be killed if he doesn't hold out the golden scepter to me. You can't go before him without an announcement ahead of time, or his invite, we should say. And she said, the law says. Well, have we ever used that as an excuse? Maybe not in our time. But it's possible that it could come to a point where the law of our land says you will do this, and it's contrary to God's law. Well, what am I going to do? I'd be just like Esther. I'd say, well, the law says, but. Well, law doesn't mean anything when it contradicts God's law, does it? Harm or death will come. Death or harm is one of the greatest motivating factors that anyone can have in any situation. And it can motivate us to good, or it can motivate us to bad. If someone was beating us up, what might we do? Defend ourselves by beating them up, right? Harm would motivate us, being harmed would motivate us to either defend ourselves or to take a position that says, well, you hit me on the right cheek and then hit me on the left, and go ahead. I think it would depend on the circumstances. If it's a religious persecution, then I ought to do what Jesus said. Let them slap me on the right one cheek, and then they can slap me on the other cheek. But if it's defense out of a pure evil person, do I have the right to defend myself? You don't want to answer that, do you? Sure I do. How do I know that? Well, go to the Garden of Gethsemane. Before they went to the garden, what question did Jesus ask them? Do you have a sword, right? Well, why ask if they had a sword if it couldn't be used in some way? But when Peter, without provocation by the mob, without an order by Jesus, pulled that sword out and cut off the ear of Malchus, Jesus rebuked him, didn't he? But what if that sword had been used to defend? Jesus had to have a reason for having them bring, and I don't believe it was just because, he knew what impetuous Peter would do. I don't believe that was it. I believe it's that we can defend ourselves. We have the right to defend ourselves against a common criminal. Harm or death, powerful motivating force. Mordecai told her, do you think you're going to escape? this planned death because you're the queen? That's basically what he was telling her. You think you're going to be able to escape this death just because you're the queen? Just because you're in a place of high power and the king loves you? Mordecai obviously believed that Esther was in this place to save the Jews. And yet, notice what he said. The same thing Paul said when speaking to Philemon. Perhaps. Mordecai didn't say, I know that you've been put where you are in order to save the Jews. He gave it a possibility. We can never know the workings of God today. Now, in their time, they could sometimes know absolutely the workings of God. How? Through a miracle. But if it wasn't a miracle, notice, through providence, Mordecai didn't seem to understand whether or not that she really was in that place. And if she wasn't, he knew that someone else would arise. And if she was placed there to save the Jews, and she didn't do it, then obviously, again, someone else would be risen up by God to save the Jews. How did he know that they had to be saved? Because he knew the prophecies about a coming Messiah that had to come through the lineage of David. He knew the Messiah hadn't come yet. And so therefore his reasoning said, the Jews have to survive because Messiah has to come through them, specifically through the lineage of David. Good logic, huh? Good reasoning. Mordecai seems pretty sure of some things, though. You know, I may not understand all of the workings of God. I may not be able to point at something specifically in my life and say, this is God working. But he knew some things and could know some things, and so can you and I. He knew that a Messiah was going to come through the lineage of David. And the lineage of David was now in captivity in this foreign land. So it had to come from there. You and I can know, even though we've never seen a miracle, we can know that there's going to be a judgment. Why? For the same reason that Mordecai knew that a Messiah was going to come. God had promised it. It was in writing. You and I have in writing that there's going to be a judgment day. So I can know that that's going to happen. I can know that there is a God, even though there is, in the minds of mankind, no way to prove it. But I can prove it. I believe I can prove it because I can look around me and see what He's created. Isn't that what the book of Romans tells me? Again, it's written for us. It teaches us, tells us that I can know that God exists. How? Because of everything that's around me. Look at the intricacies. Look at the intricacies of the human body, the number of bones that we have in our fingers, and the number of muscles. It's amazing. We have more muscles in our fingers, different muscles, I read recently, than all the other muscles in our body. Now, I don't understand how that is. I'm not a doctor. I'm not even sure I really believe that report. But isn't it interesting that if it is correct, that that's the way it is? He knew that Messiah had to come through the lineage of David, and he knew that David's lineage was now in captivity. When you go back to the book of Daniel, and you see Daniel and the three young men there, what was one of the things that we see about them? They were chosen because of their ability that had already been shown to learn and to apply knowledge. And so therefore they could continue to learn. In that time, who was it that was educated in letters, so to speak? Who was it that would receive education about maybe the planet or biology or whatever? It was the upper class. The lower classes didn't get that kind of education. They got biblical education in Israel, but generally speaking, they didn't get that kind of education. And not only that, but we're shown that these were from the royalty of the kingdom of Israel that were taken into captivity, taken into the house of the learners, the disciples, for the king, for his purposes. Enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. Look at that, verse 14. Note the exhibition of faith in God by Mordecai. Oh, he's wailing, he's carrying on because of this, but that's to bring attention to Esther, is it not? Maybe she doesn't know. Remember, we've talked about this. She led a very, very secluded life as queen. She had very little contact with the outside world. When you stop and think about this, what was his wailing and carrying on with sackcloth and ashes at the gate? It was to get attention. Bring attention to what was taking place. He's not positive of how it's going to come about, but he knows that God is going to save his people. That's faith, because he couldn't see how it could be. Once the decree of a Persian king was made, couldn't be reversed. The decree had been made that on a certain day, all the Jews could be wiped out. How's it going to be counteracted? How can we stop this? In his human eyes, there's no way for him to know that. There's no way for him to see it. But he believed that God was going to take care of it. That's faith. If God made her queen to save his people, if she didn't, he obviously believed someone else would. Look at James 4 and verse 17. I've lost track of what I was thinking about. I'm sorry. Therefore to him that knoweth to do good, and what? And doeth it not, to him it is sin. That law, that phrase, that verse, really has an existence all the way back in the Old Testament. God's people knew that they had to do what is good, what is right. And if they refused to do it, they're going to pay a price. They were commanded, for instance, to take care of the poor, to provide for them. Remember the sheaves in the field? If the reapers left a sheaf in the field, they had to forget it. It now belonged to the poor. They had to allow the corners of the field not to be reaped. Why? For the poor. If they dropped any grains as they were reaping, they had to leave them. Why? For the poor. Not to do that was not good, was evil. So the principle has always been there. If you know to do good and you don't do it, it's sin. She had an opportunity to do good, and if she didn't do it or take it, Mordecai believed that her lineage would be destroyed. Think about that. Is it possible that Esther simply had missed the thought or the belief that here was an opportunity for her? How many times have you and I missed an opportunity and later we think, oh man, I missed it. I had that opportunity to teach this person. They gave me an opportunity to teach them the gospel and I missed it. Maybe Esther was like that. How many times do we miss opportunities to do good and then realize later, I should have helped that person? Jenny and I were amazed recently. I don't know if she remembers this or not, but a few weeks ago, we were about to go into a store, and a group of young people came out the door, and they're all happy and laughing, carrying on. And they pushed the door open real big, and all of a sudden one of the girls turned around and ran back and grabbed the door and held it open for us. There was an opportunity to do good. I don't know if I'd have thought about that, would you? Maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't. Sometimes we miss opportunities to do physically good things for people, not just spiritually good things. How many opportunities have we missed over the years to teach someone the gospel of Christ? Verses 15 through 17. Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer: Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. It's obvious from these verses that Esther had received Mordecai's rebuke well. And I believe the passages just before this were a rebuke to her, verse 13 and 14. It's obvious she received them well, and now she's not resenting what he said. She's not going to say, I'll just forget about him. Esther sends a 3-pronged message to Mordecai. Her going to the king without invitation will be conditional. The Jews in Shushan are to be gathered together for 3 days. Gather them all together. It would have been interesting to watch all of that take place, I think, but nevertheless, gather them all together in one place for 3 days and 3 nights. And they're to fast and pray for these 3 days and 3 nights. They're not just to be gathered together. They are to fast and pray. Don't eat anything and be praying. Well, what do you think they were praying about? Then she made 2 promises. She said, for 3 days and 3 nights, I and my maids, we're going to do the same thing that you're doing here in Shushan. Now remember, Shushan was one of the capitals of the Persians. It's thought by many to have been what they called a summer palace. Like something like the folks from Michigan in the wintertime go to Florida, and then when the wintertime's over, they go back to Michigan, or northern states like that. She says, for 3 days and 3 nights, my maids and I are going to be doing the very same thing you're doing. Does that tell us something about Esther? Why would these maids join her in fasting and praying unless Esther had taught them the Jewish religion? What would that mean to them? Just go through the actions and emotions? Would that have done anything? No. At the end of the 3 days, she says, I will approach the king. So she's made 2 promises. I and my maids are going to fast and pray at the same time that you and the Jews of Shushan are praying and fasting. And at the end of those 3 days and 3 nights, then I will approach the king. Look at James 5 and verse 16. The effectual, fervent prayer. That word fervent prayer is one word in the original here. It means an active, efficient prayer. The active, efficient prayer of a righteous man availeth. The word iskoo means exercises force. is strong. The active, efficient prayer of a righteous man exercises forth is strong much. An emphasis on this idea of force and strong. Our prayers are valuable. Our prayers are powerful. Next to the Word of God, our prayers are the most powerful thing on the face of this earth. In my estimation, this book is the most powerful, the words found on it. But second, our prayers, they're effective, they're forceful. With all of this active, efficient, and powerful force behind her, how could she fail? How could she fail? Here's a great lesson for the church today. In times of great difficulty, and we can all agree, I'm sure, that in this account, this was a time of tremendous difficulty. This was a time of probably terror to the Jews as they contemplated all that had taken place and what would take place. What should we as God's people do? We need to pray. We need to do what Jesus would do when he faced great trials. Sit ye here while I go and pray yonder. When was that said? In Matthew 26 and verse 30, it says, when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. He had just celebrated what we call the Last Supper with his apostles. He had guided them to go with him out to the Garden of Gethsemane. He had left part of them behind, taken the inner three with him a little bit further, and he says, now sit here while I go and pray. He was about to be murdered in the most cruel way of murdering anyone that anyone has ever devised. The most hurtful way. What did he take the time to do? To pray to his Father. If he did that, shouldn't we? When a great decision was to be made, what did Jesus do? Well, look at Luke 6 and verse 12. Before choosing the apostles, that's the context, it came to pass in those days that he went out into a mountain to pray and continued all night in prayer to God. Let's ask ourselves the question, when's the last time we have prayed all night about some serious decision that needed to be made? This was an important decision. Note Esther's resignation. If I fail, if I go into the king and he doesn't hold out the golden scepter to me, then I fail. She knew what that meant. She would die. If I perish, I perish. Look at Daniel 3, verse 16 through 18 for a moment. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, well, what were they answering him about? He had built this big statue, huge statue. It was at least covered in gold, may have been solid gold. Now, we mock at that today. We say, that somebody couldn't have had that much gold, but they could have. And there's a whole lot more gold in this world than people realize under the earth where the volcanoes are. It gets spewed out from time to time, and that's when people start finding nuggets in streams and things. And Nebuchadnezzar had commanded that every one of his officials bow down and worship this statue. It was probably a statue representing himself. At the very least, Marduk, the chief god of the Persians and the Babylonians. "O Nebuchadnezzar." Oh, why were they saying this? Because somebody had been peeking instead of bowing down to the statue and watching them, and noticed they didn't bow down, and reported it to the king, and he demanded they be brought to him. And so they answered the king, "We are not careful to answer thee in this matter." What does they mean? We don't hesitate. We're not hesitating to answer you. Our convictions are steadfast, and we know exactly what we did and how we refused to bow down, and it's not going to change. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. Watch it now. But if not, if for some reason God has a higher purpose by letting us die in this furnace, okay. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. We've determined, if God will save us out of this, and we think he will, basically, I'm paraphrasing what they were saying here, and we think he will, but just in case he doesn't, we're still going to be loyal to our God. We're not going to bow down to your false gods. They were willing to pay the price for obeying God and doing what God says to do, obeying his commands. Esther was willing to pay the price for the command of Mordecai to go into Xerxes, or Ahasuerus as we know him in the scriptures. She didn't get a direct command from God, even though we now know by hindsight it was God's wish or will for her to go in to the king and save her people. But she didn't know that it absolutely was God's command for her to do that. But she was willing to pay the price if it saved her people. Joyce C. Baldwin wrote something I thought was interesting. She said, from this point on, Esther, who had up till now done as Mordecai told her, herself takes the lead and assumes responsibility in her own right. She makes a command to Mordecai. We saw that in our context. Before, it was Mordecai commanding her. In the next chapter, we're going to see Esther being blessed by God because she breaks the Persian law. In Romans 13, 1 and 2, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. I've been emphasizing this a lot over the last 6 months or so. We must obey our government. If we refuse to obey our government, we're sinning. Why? Because God's the one who appointed them. Whether we're going to be treated well or not by that government, doesn't matter. Let me suggest something else. We in America have swallowed the lie of Satan in saying American exceptionalism. Where did God say that democracy, as we practice it, is the only law that we as Christians, his people, can live under? When did God say that our country is blessed by God, and no other country is being blessed by God like our country is. Where do we get that idea? It's American exceptionalism. And that American exceptionalism has caused our country to cloak God's Word in the flag and support one country particularly because of premillennialist views. God only set up, folks, we need to understand something. God only made one special nation, His people. God only made one special physical nation, His people. He only made a covenant with one special physical people. Today, His covenant is made with a spiritual people, a spiritual nation, a spiritual kingdom. That's us, Christians. A universal kingdom that has really no borders. The gospel can be taken everywhere and is taken everywhere, all over the world. The only time we have the right to violate the law of the land is if that law that has been made violates God's commands. Why have I been emphasizing this so much? Because I believe very strongly that we as Christians are about to see a horrible time right here in America. It's being played out in other countries right now. In Nigeria, tens of thousands of, quote, Christians, end quote. Now, we understand what I mean by that. Are being slaughtered yearly. In the Sudan, the same thing. In some of the European countries, people are being thrown in jail simply for silently praying in front of an abortion clinic or reading the scriptures in public. It's been happening. And look at recent events here in the United States over this Charlie Kirk thing. Do you see the uproar of Antifa and some of these groups trying to oppose those who are trying to do what's right, what they believe is right, and call themselves Christians? The handwriting's on the wall. If God allows this world to exist much longer, we're going to see it a lot more of it right here in the United States. Look at how many church buildings have been burned. Oh, isn't that exactly what they did in Nigeria to start with? They started burning church buildings, and then they progressed to killing Christians, religious people, because they didn't follow Islam. 1 Peter 2, 3 through 14. Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto the governors, or as unto them that are sent by him, for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of them that do well. Esther will be praised, and she will be rewarded for her disobedience to government. And if the time comes when they tell us we can't worship publicly anymore, or whatever it may be, if we obey God and follow His law against the laws of government, if that time comes, and I believe it's going to come, God will reward us May not be in this life, but God will reward us for being faithful to Him. Be thou faithful, what? Unto death. I've always been very happy that God didn't say, be ye perfect unto death. Because that means after I obeyed the gospel, if it was perfect, then if I ever sinned again, that's it. It's too late. It's gone. Look at chapter 5, verse 1 and 2. Now it came to pass on the third day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house, and the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. The third day, she did exactly what she said she was going to do. Probably the third day of the fast. Note that Esther's preparations to approach the king were made. First, she prepared herself spiritually. She and her maids had bowed themselves to God. They had fasted. They had offered their prayers night and day for 3 days. And second, she prepared herself physically. Now, think about it. If you were asked to go before the President of the United States, I know some people today are just so lacking in pride that they would go before him in rags if they felt like it would denigrate him in some way. But think about it. Normally, if you and I were invited to go before the President, how do you think we'd dress? Wouldn't we make sure we took a nice bath or shower and cleaned ourselves up and put some nice clothes on and get that opportunity? Why? Because of his position. Doesn't matter who it was. Didn't matter if it was Biden or Trump. It doesn't matter. Esther put on her royal apparel. Oh, she dressed to the nines, we'd say today. She got all fancy. And with her natural beauty that we saw earlier described, plus her royal robes, man, she must have been something to see. She must have been absolutely striking. He hadn't seen her in a month. He'd not invited her to come to him for a month. All of her preparation, both spiritual and physical, undoubtedly worked to her advantage. It would set her well, we would say. And the king sitting on his royal throne in the royal house, which was over against the gate. This seems to have been a special room that was set aside as the palace where judgments were made, decisions were made by the king. The king sat with his back against the wall. He faced the door. Any of you know somebody like that? Jenny's down here saying, I know someone real well like that. She will always defer to me, where do you want to sit if we're out in a restaurant somewhere? I want my back to the wall. I want to see the door. I want to see who's coming in. The king wasn't any dummy. He knew that people were going to try and assassinate him from time to time, so he's sitting, obviously, with his back to the wall and facing the door, the gate. Verse 2 shows Esther entered the court and she stood waiting. Notice, she didn't just boldly enter in and just keep walking toward the king. She stopped. She's waiting. I've often wondered what kind of thoughts were running through her mind as she waited to see what the king was going to do. Maybe she was thinking, will the king order her executed for intruding on his space? Or would he grant her mercy? Well, the text tells us she obtained favor in the king's sight. Favor was shown by extending to Esther the golden scepter, the symbol of his authority and his rule. I believe two things are shown here. I believe the king really loved Esther. It wasn't just words. He really loved her, as we saw in chapter 2 and verse 17, above all women. It wasn't just words. Remember, this took place several years after the putting her in as queen. And I believe we see the providence of God working. She obtained favor in his sight, verse 2. Look at Proverbs 21 and verse 1. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Notice that. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. If a man shows belligerence toward God, God can turn his heart to becoming extremely wicked. But if it's a soft heart, he can also meld it to show love. So the king holds out the golden scepter to Esther. But notice what Esther did. There was more to this than just holding it out. She walked up and she touched it. Now, think about this just for a moment. Two actions are seen. He holds the golden scepter out, and she walks up to it and touches it. Two things had to be done, didn't they? What if the king held out the golden scepter and somebody refused it? You say, well, why would anybody do that? I remember reading years ago about a man who was condemned to die. I can't remember which method, but he was deemed to have committed crime so bad that he was going to be executed, and the President of the United States issued him a pardon, and the man refused it. And the Supreme Court didn't know what to do. Immediately there was a hearing done. What do we do? We've never had anybody deny a pardon. They want to live. And finally, the Supreme Court said, basically, you can offer it, but if it's not accepted, then you have to go through with the original plan and execute him. And he was executed. It appears that something of the same nature is here. If God offers you and I pardon, what if we refuse it? You see, we have our part to play too. We have to receive it. I believe this is language that is meant to help us understand that exact principle. When mercy, which is what Ahasuerus was showing toward Esther, is extended, we have to accept it. If we refuse it, we've got nothing left.